revealed the incredible journey of poor peasants and the amazing places they found to stay. Clara Parker was a single mother, her world as vast and complicated as the cornfields surrounding their small town. At 34, her face reflected years of hard work, worry, and unwavering love for her 2 kids. Living paycheck to paycheck with just a few dollars to her name, she worked long shifts at the local diner, where the coffee was always hot, but the hearts were often heavy. The walls of their aging home whispered memories of laughter, but the weight of despair began creeping in. She could feel the rot in the timbers and the cracks in the walls echoing her relentless fight for a better future. Each day, as she balanced plates and wiped tables, Clara dreamed of a brighter tomorrow. She longed for a home where her kids could play without the shadow of uncertainty. The bright colors of Main Street, with children biking past ice cream shops and neighbors sharing familiar smiles, seemed to dim with the struggles she faced. Yet in this struggling rural town, every Sunday potluck and Friday church gathering provided moments of connection, reminders of the resilient spirit alive in everyone even if they often went unheard. Then came the announcement about a fundraiser aimed at saving local businesses and keeping life on Main Street alive. A tiny flicker of hope ignited within her chest. Maybe this is what we need, she thought. Clara signed up to volunteer, her heart racing with excitement and fear. Through the hustle and bustle of the event, she watched the community come together, an elderly man offering to babysit her children, veterans sharing stories that resonated with her own sacrifices, neighbors banding together in solidarity. Just when Clara felt a surge of confidence as she watched her community come alive, a cold wave of judgment washed over her. Doubt sneaked in, whispering that she was less than, that her dreams of escaping their crumbling house were foolish. A lump grew in her throat as she turned away from the laughter and brightness, feeling the sting of social prejudice deep in her bones. A confrontation at the fundraiser thrust Clara into action, leading her to a town hall meeting where emotions ran high. As she stood there, a small voice called to her, and she felt compelled to share her story, the truth of her struggles. The room fell quiet. As she opened up about how her family fought to survive, one by one, the voices of her neighbors began to rise. Stories of hardship spilled out, moments of vulnerability erupted in a wave of empathy and compassion that filled the space between them. But as her confession hung in the air, fear crept back in. The quiet weight of judgment threatened to crush her fragile sense of hope. Clara could feel the tension coiling in her chest, squeezing tight. What if they don't understand? She thought, her voice shaking as she pressed on. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As tensions peaked, Clara's heart raced and the walls around her seemed to dissolve. Would they recognize the strength and vulnerability? The horizon blurred with uncertainty, yet a spark of possibility flickered in the hazy atmosphere. The room simmered with emotions: anger, love, ambition, and Clara could only wonder if her pursuit for a better future would echo in the hearts of those who stood beside her. As murmurs filled the air, she felt the bittersweet taste of courage. It was a dizzying mix of hope and regret that left her breathless. Would her family, her community, find the strength to heal? As the meeting progressed, the chains of prejudice seemed on the brink of breaking, leaving Clara with one burning question: what would it take for their dreams to soar beyond the difficulties that tugged relentlessly at their souls? Clara took a deep breath, letting the air settle in her lungs. It felt heavy, filled with unspoken fears, but also with a determination she hadn't known she had. She scanned the faces in front of her: neighbors, friends, strangers. Each wore expressions of concern and curiosity, their eyes reflecting something deeper than mere sympathy. Perhaps it was the spark of shared struggle. Suddenly, the tension felt different. It was as if the room had shifted in favor of understanding. I'm Clara, she started again, recalibrating her voice. I'm just a single mom trying to do my best. The acceptance that fluttered back from the crowd was electric. As she spoke of her sleepless nights worrying about bills, and of her dreams for her children as futures, she saw heads nodding. Voices began to rise in agreement, and before she knew it, others stood up, sharing their stories of hardship amidst nods and murmurs of support. "I lost my job 2 months ago," a sturdy-looking man with weathered hands admitted. "Trying to save my home has been a nightmare." Clara felt a wave of bond wash over her, mingling her own vulnerabilities with his. One by one, the stories poured from her community, a cathartic flow that washed over doubts and fears like the first spring rain. There was Mrs. Thompson, who spoke of her late husband's battle with illness and the costs that drained her savings. And Jacob, a teenager still in high school, who lost a scholarship when his family faced eviction. Each revelation shattered the illusions of isolation that plagued them all. As Clara listened, her heart filled with hope, nudging away the fear she had been clinging to. Maybe this was the spark they all needed. Maybe together they could forge a path that led them away from despair. But as the meeting came to its close, Clara felt unease crinkle her stomach. What happens next? She thought, standing silent in the crowd while plans began to form. Could they really rally together, pooling their resources and strengths to create a real change? Or would the fire of this moment flicker and die, a fleeting memory of hope? "Let us meet again next week," someone called, and the crowd buzzed with enthusiasm. Clara joined in the conversations, voices echoing with determination and laughter. But deep down, there was a nagging question, that echo of judgment that had haunted her. Would everyone be willing to participate, not just in words but in actions? As she gathered her children later that night, she felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. How could she dig deeper, find the courage to step up? She had voiced her story, but what about the actions that were needed next? Could she lead a charge to help not just her family, but others facing the same struggles? She tucked her kids into bed, kissing their foreheads softly. "Tomorrow is a new day," she whispered, closing the door quietly. Clara sat in the dim light of the living room, shadows dancing on the walls. She looked at the community flyer tacked to the bulletin board, the words glimmering with potential. And there it was, that flicker of doubt returning. What would she lose if she pushed too hard? What if her voice didn't lead to change, but instead exposed her to more judgment? Clara took a long breath, placing her hand over her heart. It was time to find that spark within, the courage to face both their demons and dreams head-on. With a resolve tightening around her, she began to jot down notes for the next meeting. As her pen scratched across the page, her thoughts raced. What if the next step could break down not just barriers, but bonds that had been hidden for too long? As the clock ticked through the night, Clara held tightly to the hope blooming in her chest. But outside, a storm gathered, dark clouds looming on the horizon, and Clara knew that sometimes the path to resilience came heavy with obstacles. How would her community weather the storm ahead? The week rolled in like the storm clouds that loomed overhead, and Clara felt the weight of her resolve settle heavier upon her shoulders. Each day brought new preparations for the upcoming meeting, which had transformed from a hopeful gathering to a sacred mission in her mind. She knew that the success of this meeting rested on her shoulders. But as the day approached, doubt clawed at her spirit, whispering insecurities that threatened to drown out the hopeful murmurs of her neighbors. On the evening of their next gathering, Clara arrived early, tapping her foot against the pavement, excitement clashing with anxiety. The community center felt different this time, charged with an anticipation that crackled in the air. She set up chairs in a circle, trying to envision the connection that would take place within those four walls. As friends and neighbors filtered in, Clara offered them encouraging smiles, her heart swelling as she watched their familiar faces fill the room. Mrs. Thompson came with cookies, a basket bobbing at her hip, and Clara felt a little warmth in her chest. "You have brought sweet hope with you," she called, which broke the tension and started the laughter that filled the room. Once everyone was settled, Clara stood at the front, studying the faces before her, a mosaic of lives woven together by shared struggles. "I'm so glad we're all here again," she began, her voice steadying as she looked into the eyes of each person. "Last week, we shared our burdens, but now I want us to think about how we can lift each other up. A ripple of conversation broke out, and Clara watched as ideas began to bounce around the room, an energy building that felt both beautiful and fragile. Jacob proposed a community garden. The idea sparked laughter and cheers. It was a tangible goal, something they could tend to together, physically manifesting their unity, and the idea took root in Clara's mind. But soon, her heart sank as an unexpected voice cut through the excitement. "How do we know this will even work?" An older man chimed in, skepticism shadowing his tone. "What if we invest time and we don't see any change? What if this is just a waste?" The room fell silent, and Clara's own doubts echoed in his words. The swollen knot in her stomach returned. But these were the moments that defined a community, the moments they needed to confront. She stepped towards him, her chin raised. "You're right," she declared. "It might not work. But what if it does? What if we find strength in one another?" As the murmurs of discontent faded, she pressed on. "We don't have to face this alone. We have each other. Let us try together. Let us show up for one another." One by one, the crowd shifted, voices rose with hesitant yet hopeful enthusiasm. Someone suggested forming committees, sharing skills like home repairs, cooking workshops, or budgeting classes. There was a spark in the collective energy, and Clara felt her chest swell with pride. But just as she began to relax, the outside world intruded. The overhead lights flickered ominously, the wind howled against the windows, and a sudden crash shook the building. Gasps echoed through the room. Clara glanced around, eyes wide, and heart racing. What if this was a sign, a warning of what lay ahead? Should they push forward despite it all? Or retreat back to the safety of their own homes? As the storm raged outside, the question loomed heavy in the air, suspending their hopes and fears in a fragile balance. Clara's resolve battled with the instinct to flee. "What will we do next?" she whispered to herself, her voice drowned out by the storm. She felt the storm inside her heart, a clash of fear and determination. And amidst the brewing chaos, a quiet thought took root. Sometimes storms aren't just something to weather, they're moments to grow stronger together. But who would take that leap with her? The sound of thunder roared outside, drowning Clara's thoughts. It rattled the windows, adding to the anxiety closing in on the room. The faces of her neighbors, once full of energy, were now etched with uncertainty. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, and a flicker of doubt danced behind her eyes. "Clara," Jacob said, his voice cutting through the tension, "what do you think we should do?" He looked at her, trust mixed with fear in his gaze. The responsibility of being their anchor, of being the one to guide them through this storm, pressed heavily on her. Before she could respond, another loud crash this time. It sounded frighteningly close. The lights flickered again, their view of the outside world obstructed by sheets of rain pounding against the glass. It was as if the storm was demanding an answer, challenging their resolve. "Maybe we should just wait it out," someone murmured, and Clara's heart sank further. She could sense the retreat happening. Fear had a way of folding in on itself, wrapping its cold fingers around their optimism. "No!" Clara's voice rang out, filled with a passionate urgency that surprised her. Everyone turned to her, and she saw the same hesitation mirrored back at her. "This is our moment. If we leave now, we'll just be hiding away in our houses, alone with our fears. But if we stay, if we work together, we could find a way to overcome. I assent that what we want." A few heads nodded slowly, but doubt lingered like the storm outside. Clara glanced towards the door, the promise of safety just beyond it, and she felt the conflict surge inside her. What was safety worth if it meant retreating from a challenge that could strengthen them all? "Think about the community garden," Clara urged, her voice more steady now. "Think about the people we could help, the connections we could build. What if this storm is just the first test, and we can show it we're not afraid?" That spark she had seen earlier flickered to life again, small at first, then growing brighter. Trudy, a quiet woman at the back, spoke up. "I'll help with gardening. My parents had a garden back in the day. I remember how it brought the neighbors together." "Exactly." Clara beamed. "You see? This can start small. We can learn as we go. Let's south, not let fear close us off. The energy shifted again, filling the room with courage. They began to share even more ideas now, voices overlapping with excitement. It felt exhilarating. Suddenly, the storm outside became a metaphor, threatening, yes, but also invigorating. The lights flickered once more, and Clara took a deep breath as she made her way to the window. She could see the trees bending, branches dancing wildly against the wind. "Look out there!" she called, motioning towards the chaos. "It's scary, but it's also alive. We are alive. And we are here together." Just then, a loud bang erupted in the distance, a thunderclap so powerful it felt like it struck the ground. Panic flashed across the room, and the energy that had built up faltered momentarily. "Should we just go?" Jacob's voice was quivering. "What if we take a moment?" Clara suggested, the fire in her heart igniting a resolve to push through. "Let us take a brief break, breathe, and then come back together. We can decide on our next steps, but let us do it united and calm." As the group huddled together, Clara's eyes caught a glimpse of Mrs. Thompson, who was clutching her cookie basket tightly. A small smile escaped her lips. "I still have cookies to share, after all." Laughter mingled with the chaotic sounds of the storm. It was a shared moment that reminded them of why they were there, why this mattered. But as Clara watched the camaraderie form, she felt another question bubble up inside her. What would they do when the heartbeat of the storm faded? Would they still be strong enough to hold on to their promises when the skies cleared? The storm might have been fierce, but now they were fierce too. They were beginning to awaken something incredible within each other, something that could weather any storm. And as that feeling settled in, Clara's heart raced. For an entirely different reason, one brewing with anticipation. Where would their journey take them next? The storm outside roared on, but inside the dimly lit room, something new was stirring. Clara could feel it, a pulse of energy, a surge of hope that threaded through the group like a warm current. Each nervous laugh and tentative smile seemed to knit their fears together into something stronger. If only this energy could shield them from the storm outside. "Let us divide up," Clara said, speaking with renewed conviction. "We should every person pitch in with a task. We could work on the garden and maybe even come up with a plan to bolster our homes against storms like this in the future. We can actually do something." She could hear her own heart beating faster, words tumbling out almost without thought. Jacob moved closer, nodding, caught up in the tide of her enthusiasm. "Yeah. We can make a list of supplies we need. Trudy, you mentioned your parents helped with the neighbor's garden. Maybe we could use some of their ideas?" Trudy nodded excitedly, her eyes brightening as she spoke. "They used to have a compost system that really helped the soil. And we could plant flowers that attract bees. They'll help with other plants later." The neighbors, who moments ago seemed weighed down by fear, now offered suggestions like wildfire. Clara noted small, flickering smiles reappearing as people began brainstorming. Each voice added to the tapestry of hope draping over the room, weaving their worries into something much brighter. Suddenly, a loud crash caught their attention, and everyone froze, voices trailing off into uncertain silence. The wind shrieked outside, pushing against the world as if trying to break through their sanctuary. Clara's heart raced again, but this time for a different reason. It was a test of their shared resolve. "Let us focus," Clara urged, heart in her throat. "What we are doing here is bigger than the storm. We can take charge together." She scanned their faces, searching for that flicker of determination she had seen moments before. "These ideas may help keep our homes strong. And let us make the garden happen together." Their responses were hesitant at first, but gradually, the murmurs grew louder, more confident. Each person began discussing their ideas, the energy in the room swelling. Clara could see people leaning in, listening intently. As they organized, a small rustle interrupted them. Mrs. Thompson had stood up, her cookie basket now screened before her like a treasure trove. "I know the world is wild outside," she said, a twinkle in her eyes. "But something sweet can remind us of why we're trying to stay strong. Who wants a cookie?" Laughter erupted amid the chaos. Jacob grabbed a cookie, then another, and handed them around as if they were pieces of courage. The small act transformed the dynamics in the room once again. She felt a warmth wash over her, filling the spaces where fear had just been. As laughter took over the tension, Clara couldn't help but smile. This was it. They would face whatever came together. But lurking in her mind was another, more daunting thought: what if working together opened their wounds rather than healing them? An uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. While they had formed a strong bond, could the weight of their past struggles resurface as they took on the pressure of their collective future? Would they still stand united when the calm finally returned? Then another clap of thunder jolted her back to the present. As the storm raged on, Clara's resolve resurfaced. They had made it this far. Okay, she said, trying to grasp the strength of those around her. Let us get started. We'll find a way to not only weather this storm, but to come out even stronger and better prepared for the next one. The group nodded, a renewed sense of determination echoing throughout the room. They had decisions to make, paths to explore, and together, they would forge their way forward. But as they gathered their supplies, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something profound, a change that would alter not only their community, but also how each of them saw themselves. What would they uncover in the process? What untold stories lay waiting among them, longing to be shared? With those questions hanging in the air, the storm outside continued to rage, but within, a new journey was just beginning. Clara gestured towards a table piled with supplies, and people flocked to it like moths to light. As they began sorting through old gardening tools, faded seeds, and tattered books on improving soil quality, excitement crackled in the air. The room, once heavy with fear, felt lighter, brimming with potential. Let us split up into groups, Jacob suggested, his enthusiasm infectious. Some of us can go through the seeds, while others figure out what we might need to fortify our homes. What about decorations? Trudy chimed in, her eyes wide. We could also plant things that make us happy. Flowers. Those will remind us of better days. Flowers that attract bees will help our crops in the summer too. Someone else said, and soon ideas were bouncing off the walls. Names of plants echoed like an incantation, names that brought life and color to mind. Clara's heart swelled with pride and warmth. The little whispers of hope felt like an encouraging anthem, each word a step towards recovery. But with excitement came the weight of responsibility. She caught herself wondering where they might falter, if they would fall back into old habits instead of pushing forward. Before long, Clara glanced at the window. The storm lashed the glass, the rain pounding like ferocious drumbeats. Yet the laughter and excitement inside the room formed a barrier much more powerful than any storm outside. She wished they could bottle that energy, take it with them into the world. Let us remember, she said, her voice steady. We're working for our homes, but also for ourselves. Each seed of hope we plant together can grow into something beautiful. A ripple of agreement washed through the group. Hours seemed to melt away as they worked, each task filled with purpose. It wasn't just about a garden anymore. It was about healing and building strength within the community. Clara noticed Mrs. Thompson in the corner, sharing stories with younger kids while showing them how to plant seeds, her gentle words weaving history into the new growth they were fighting to nurture. As the workday drew to a close, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. They had made something tangible together, a plan, a vision, and most importantly, a bond fortified under the weight of shared experience. But just as Clara thought they might be finished, the faint sound of sobbing broke through the noise. She turned to find Melanie, one of the quieter members, sitting with her head in her hands. Concern washed over Clara. Melanie, she said softly, moving to sit beside her. What's wrong? Melanie looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. I thought I could put all of this behind me, the nightmares, the losses. I was just so tired of feeling this way, you know? Clara felt her heart crack open, a wave of empathy rushing through. It's okay to feel that way. We're all scared. But facing it together is our strength. You're not alone in this. Their group gathered, forming a circle around Melanie, voices filled with understanding and reassurance. Clara watched as fear slowly shifted into comfort, the intimacy of shared struggles making them stronger. As they wrapped up for the evening, Clara took one last look around the room. The chaos of emotions felt like threads weaving an intricate fabric of connection among them. Whatever the storm had brought with its chaos and fear was slowly transforming into resilience and unity. But just as hope began to wrap around her like a warm blanket, another crash echoed from outside. Clara turned, her heart thumping loud in her chest. What could possibly happen now? The power of their togetherness felt shaken, and as the foundations of their world trembled once more, the question lingered: would their strength stand firm against the next test? Clara held her breath, eyes wide as the sound of splintering would rip through the air. The warmth of the room evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that slithered down her spine. She felt the heavy echo of fear creeping back in, but she quickly pushed it aside. "Stay together," Jacob called out, his voice cutting sharply through the tension. The group shuffled closer, instinctively forming a tighter circle, the bond they had just forged seeming to glow, even against the night's encroaching shadows. "It might be nothing more than the storm," Trudy whispered, though her voice trembled. "Sometimes trees fall in the wind." Clara nodded slowly, but her gut twisted at the thought. She couldn't shake the feeling that something more was lurking just beyond their fragile sanctuary. The world outside was wild, unpredictable, and while they had begun to find solace within themselves, the upcoming test felt monumental. The storm raged on, howling outside like a wounded creature, and before they could steady themselves, the door swung open with a guttural creak, revealing the writhing chaos of wind and rain alongside a group of frightened figures. Clara squinted into the darkness, panic rising as she assessed the newcomers. Were they friend or foe? "Please help us!" a tall man shouted, his voice hoarse and desperate. Behind him stood several equally wearied souls, soaked to the bone and trembling. The sight struck Clara like a lightning bolt. "Get inside," Jacob urged, waving them forward. "Quickly!" One by one, the huddle of strangers stumbled in, their shivering forms painted by flashes of lightning. As Clara stepped forward, she could see the fear etched on their faces, mirroring the same feelings she had felt not long ago. "What happened?" Clara asked, instinctively reaching for the closest figure, an elderly woman, her hand shaking as it clutched a small wooden box. "Bandits," the woman gasped, her voice cracked with exhaustion. "They took everything, our homes, everything we loved." A gasp rippled through the room, and Clara felt the weight of their shared reality crashing down like the storm outside. The group's unity had been their strength, but faced with the despair of others, doubt washed over her. "Can we share our resources?" someone suggested quietly. "What if we divide what we have?" The air held a stillness, the kind that clung to the skin and suffocated joy. Clara turned to her group, then to the newcomers. She realized the battle for survival wasn't just her own. It expanded far beyond the circle they had formed. Everyone needed a home, a patch of safety to cultivate hope. "Absolutely," Clara finally said, her voice firm. "Let us show them what we've built together. We can do this." But as they gathered supplies and shared their meager resources, the storm outside roared louder, and the shadows seemed to multiply. Clara caught a glimpse of the elderly woman's expression, a flicker of fear that ignited something in her. A thought emerged fiercely: were they truly safe here? Just then, a sharp knocking echoed from the door again. Clara's heart dropped. They had welcomed the vulnerable, but had they unknowingly invited danger as well? Clara's gaze flickered from the door to her friends, and then back to the strangers huddled close. Whatever lay beyond that threshold, they would face it together. Would their joined spirit be enough to weather not just the storm but what lay beyond it? The knock echoed once more, sending shivers through Clara's spine. She held her breath, listening intently as her heart raced. The newcomers looked equally anxious, their eyes darting toward the door. A heartbeat stretched, heavy and taut in the silence. "Should we let them in?" Trudy whispered, her voice barely above the thunder. Jacob glanced at Clara, searching her face for a sign. His brow furrowed, yet she could see a glimmer of resolve in his gaze. "We can't leave anyone out there," he said, steadiness creeping back into his voice. Right, Clara said, her own voice trembling. But we need to be careful. We don't know who or what we're dealing with. With an unsteady nod, Clara moved to the door, hesitating just for a moment. The storm howled like a banshee, but she forced herself to swing the door open. Chilled air blasted in, swirling around her, electrifying her resolve. At the threshold stood a ragged figure with dark, mud-streaked clothes. The man's face was hidden beneath a hood, soaked and shadowed, but his voice cut through the lightning. We need sanctuary. Please, he pleaded, stepping forward as if the weight of the world pressed on his shoulders. Go back. The tall man from before, newly sheltered, surged forward, eyes aflame with recognition. You're one of them. You're one of the bandits. Clara's heart raced. This new arrival was clutching something, a weapon? Every instinct told her to slam the door shut and bar it. But before she could act, the man burst past her, shoving through the doorway. A scuffle erupted. Clara felt panic surge through the group as shadows raced against shadows. Voices rose, confusion enveloping the room like an encroaching fog. Stop! Everyone stop! Clara shouted, her voice cutting through the fray. We don't want to fight. Just stop! The moment hung thick in the air. She felt the pulse of tension ricochet through her, her gaze darting between the strangers, caught in a web of heartache and distrust. Finally, the hooded man froze, breath quickening as he surveyed the scene, realizing they were all on the same side, survivors. Please, he gasped, lowering his hands in surrender. You have to listen. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm escaping just like you. The elderly woman moved closer, her weathered face etched with doubt yet softened by the vulnerability of their reality. What do you know? She asked, tremors in her voice. A plan, the man replied, his words flowing like water. They've taken everything from us. I know where we can go, someplace safe. Somewhere we can rebuild. Clara felt the stirrings of hope mixed with skepticism. Could this be their chance? Or was it another deception? The room was silent, the wind howling its complaint outside, yet all eyes were fixed on this man, waiting for reassurance. I've seen this place, he continued, desperation lacing his words. It's not far from here, but we have to leave right now. If we stay, we are putting ourselves at risk with every moment that passes. Risk? Clara echoed, caught between fear and a flicker of excitement. You think it's safe there? Safer than here, he insisted, and there was fire in his eyes that momentarily pushed back the shadows of doubt. She turned to her friends, searching their faces for answers, for direction. Jacob nodded, the tiniest of gestures, as if he felt the same weight of responsibility she did. They had built something new together, but could they leave it? What's it going to be? Clara asked, realizing there was no turning back. The storm wouldn't just fade, it would only grow stronger. Would they take a leap into the unknown in hopes of a brighter dawn? There was a pause, a flicker of uncertainty, but it was clear, whatever lay ahead, they would face together. She took a deep breath, her voice steadying. Then let us go. Together. As they gathered their few belongings, Clara felt the tension ease just a little. Outside the storm raged, but within her, a quiet strength grew. Let us find our new home, she whispered to herself, just as another crash of thunder echoed through the night. Would this journey lead them to safety? Or just more heartbreak? Clara couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing, and not just because of the storm. In this moment, she realized it was much more than survival, they were fighting for a future. But as they stepped out into the fierce night, she couldn't help but wonder what awaited them in the dark and if they'd be able to stick together when it counted the most. As Clara and her group stepped into the night, the storm lashed out around them. Rain drenched their clothes, soaking them to the bone, but the chill didn't just come from the weather. The tension hung in the air like the electricity before a lightning strike. The hooded man led them, his steps sure despite the chaos around them. Stay close, he called, glancing back to ensure they were following. Through the curtain of rain, shadows flickered between the trees, and Clara felt the weight of unaddressed fears. Who else was out there? The sound of thunder rolled, louder than before, and it made Clara jump. Jacob reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. They were together, but the ache of uncertainty knotted her stomach. Could this stranger truly guide them to safety, or were they walking further into danger? Do you really know this place? Trudy asked, breathless and shivering. Are we safe? The man turned slightly, revealing just enough of his face that Clara could see the lines of worry etched on his forehead. I'd been there, he assured. When the attacks began, I fled to that stronghold. They chased me, but I managed to escape. We can make it there if we stick together. His words sounded almost too good to be true. Clara knew that safety had become a luxury few could afford. She wished she could see his eyes fully, to judge the sincerity behind them. With mud sucking at their shoes and each step becoming a struggle, Clara didn't dare slow down. The echoes of their past haunted her with every footfall. She thought of the home they left behind, the life that once felt secure. And then, without warning, the howling wind faltered, giving way to an eerie stillness. Clara's heart dropped as her surroundings dimmed. What is happening? She whispered. Stay alert, the hooded man instructed, glancing toward the tree line. We have to keep moving. But before they could continue, a figure emerged from the darkness, blocking their path. Clara's pulse quickened as she recognized the tall silhouette. It was the man from the shelter, the one whose eyes glowed with anger just moments before. You're leading them straight into a trap, he shouted, voice booming over the storm. They'll pick us off one by one. Clara's chest tightened. What do you want? She asked, taking a step forward, trying to mask her fear with determination. The man's eyes darted back and forth, the wildness in them betraying a mental struggle. I don't want anyone else to die, he said, and for the first time, Clara detected a glimmer of pain. We can't trust him. But he's one of us, Clara countered. He's trying to save us. There is no safety out here. The man shot back. You don't know what it's like. I can. Before the confrontation could escalate, another scream cut through the air. It was distant, but unmistakable. Clara's heart clenched. It was a desperate sound, one that sent chills down her spine. Go! The hooded man urged again, voice urgent. We can't stand here. But Clara hesitated, looking between the two men. The storm had drawn them all into an impossible situation, creating fractures where she had hoped for unity. Did they share the same goal, or were they just two sides of the same coin, each hiding darker motives? Which way? Clara shouted over the growing storm, desperation leaking through her voice. The hooded man pointed to the left, his face taut with tension. Clara held Jacob's hand tighter, knowing that whichever path they chose could change everything. Together, right? Clara murmured, hoping to reassure them both. We have to trust each other, Jacob replied quietly. As they started down the left path, Clara couldn't shake off the feeling that they were entering the mouth of the storm. Every shadow felt alive. The weight of their choices pressed heavily on her shoulders, mixed with the fear of what lay ahead. Just as they pushed forward, Clara felt a presence trailing them, a whisper of the unknown that stirred deep inside her. She turned back one last time, half expecting to see familiar faces, but the darkness consumed them. All that was left was the howling wind. The journey has just begun, she thought, knowing full well that they were not just running from something, but towards something they could scarcely imagine. And as the path twisted ahead, she couldn't help but wonder what secrets awaited them in the dark, and whether they could face the trials still to come. Clara and her group pressed forward, wind and rain battering against their bodies like a relentless force. The shadows of the trees loomed over them, monstrous and twisted, but Clara fought to focus on the light ahead, the hope of a stronger bond, a safe haven, a place where their dreams could take root. As they moved silently through the storm, Clara could feel her heart thundering in sync with the chaos around them. The hooded man led the way, his pace steady but glancing nervously at the darkness behind them. Clara felt a strange mix of trust and suspicion tugging at her heart. Could he really lead them to safety, or was this another layer of deception enveloping their once simply shared fight against isolation? Each step took them farther from the center of their previous home, a place filled with the warmth of shared stories and the laughter of resilient spirits. But Clara was done cowering behind fear. She looked around at the weary faces of her friends, seeing their determination mingling with doubt. "We're always stronger together," she whispered, desperate to rally their spirits. Suddenly, a low rumble of thunder echoed ominously. From the darkness, figures began to emerge, a small group, shadows cut from the fabric of the storm. Clara's breath hitched as they appeared, faces lit by brief flashes of lightning. "They're not bandits," the hooded man assured, hands raised in peace. "They're survivors." As the group drew closer, Clara's fear melted away, replaced with a powerful sense of kinship. They were just like her, lost but searching, desperate but not defeated. The fear in their eyes spoke volumes. They had faced the darkness, and now they gathered together, united by an unspoken understanding. "What's your plan?" a woman asked, shivering from the rain. "Are we just running?" "No," Clara replied, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. "We're building a new community. A garden, a home for dreams, not just survival." The hooded man nodded, his face softening. "Exactly. There's a place I know, a farm where we can all stay. It's not far. If we work together, we can make it happen." The wind howled, sending chills through the group, but Clara could see the flicker of hope in their eyes as her words ignited something within them. Night after night, they had lingered in shadows, but now it was time to step into the light of a new dawn. Suddenly, a figure emerged behind them, a familiar face. It was Jacob, looking panic-stricken. "You all can't go deeper into the woods. It's dangerous." He glanced over his shoulder, breathless. "The last storm took everything from us. We'll be lost." Clara's heart ached at the unmistakable fear in his voice. She stepped forward, hands outstretched. "No, Jacob. We're not lost. We're with each other, and that makes us strong. We can make it to this farm together." Without hesitation, she took his hand, feeling the warmth radiate from their touch. A spark ignited in his eyes, and silently he understood. They were bound by something deeper than despair, hope. Clara turned to the crowd, all eyes on her, hers filled with light. "Let us move. Together we can thrive, not just survive." As they gathered, the group formed a tight circle. They locked hands, forming an unbreakable chain of unity. It felt exhilarating and terrifying, but the storm around them faded into the background, muffled by their shared resolve. They took their first steps forward, breaking through barriers of fear, each footfall echoing like a rallying cry against the darkness. With every inch they traversed, Clara felt the grip of worry loosening, and a victory fluttering closer. The storm howled in protest, but together they pushed on, hearts beating as one. Each face shining in the flashes of lightning became symbols of resilience, carrying forward a vision of hope. As dawn approached, the rain softened, leaving droplets hanging like diamonds on the leaves, and Clara's heart pounded with each glimpse of the faint light pushing through the trees. "We are on the brink of something beautiful," she declared, her voice filled with fierce pride. The destination lay just beyond a thicket, a promising expanse where wild flowers peeked through the tangled grass. Clara gasped, exhilarated, as they reached a clearing. Before them stood a humble farmhouse, worn but welcoming, bathed in the early light of morning. Breathless with possibility, Clara turned to her group. "This is it," she whispered, the weight of the night lifting entirely. As they stepped forward, they entered a new chapter, one filled with connection, collaboration, and a shared dream of transformation. Here, together, they would build not just shelter from the storms of life, but a vibrant community filled with laughter, stories, and hope, an incredible journey that began with just one courageous step. And with that final thought, a feeling of fullness washed over Clara, and she smiled radiant and resolute. The storm had tested their spirit, but they learned that the ties that bind us are far stronger than the trials that tear us apart. Now, it was time to grow the garden of their dreams, weaving together a community that would flourish amid adversity. They would embrace the beauty of their shared journey, ready to overcome any storm. You need to subscribe now to follow Clara and her friends on the next step of their incredible adventure. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to help spread their story, and comment your thoughts and feelings about this journey. Finally, Share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You all have the power to change lives. Don't wait not even one more second to share the love.